John, 谢谢你 ，Thank you for that very nice introduction. 我今天非常荣幸能够有这个机会跟你们讲话。But I will also say that I'm absolutely amazed that nobody has raised today with me the most important event in cross-strait relations in quite a while. I heard there was a badminton match in Tokyo where Taiwan did very, very well. I want to congratulate the men's badminton doubles team on a job well done. As John pointed out, I was last year in 2019 celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act with many of the people in this room. In many ways, the time since then has been difficult. Many of us here today probably feel as though we've been locked up for the last year or so in hibernation as the world tackled the COVID-19 pandemic. That said, in the interim, the people-to-people relationship between Taiwan and the United States during that period has been doing nothing like I feared. This year I decided to title my speech Taiwan and the United States, a look ahead, with the intention of signaling something different. For a long time, it was easy to kind of dust off prior speeches, since there was often not that much new to share about the U.S.-Taiwan relationship. But I don't feel that way this year. In order to look at the future, I will start by looking at the recent past. I want to review for you what has remained the same in the U.S.-Taiwan relationship, what has changed, and where we are right now. So to start off, what remains the same? I know that many on Taiwan were pleased with the progress in the U.S.-Taiwan relationship under the previous administration. And they perhaps were worried about the impact that a change in the U.S. administration might have on that relationship. In his confirmation hearing, however, now Secretary of State Blinken put those fears to rest, saying, and I quote, "We will stand with friends and allies to advance our shared prosperity, security, and values in the Asia-Pacific region. And that includes deepening our ties with Taiwan." Taiwan is a leading democracy and a critical economic and security partner, he went on to say. Its future matters to the United States for all these reasons. America's commitment to Taiwan will remain rock solid. Rock solid. That's pretty clear. And it is a commitment that the Biden administration has continued to reiterate and to demonstrate ever since. For example, former Senator Chris Dodd, former Deputy Secretaries of State Richard Armitage, and James Stoltenberg headed to Taiwan earlier this year at President Joe Biden's request in what a White House official called a personal signal of the President's commitment. While much is happening in U.S. relations with Taiwan, the U.S. One China policy remains the same. The United States remains committed to the peaceful resolution of cross-strait differences as long as that resolution is without coercion and consistent with the wishes and best interests of the people on Taiwan. We will continue to meet our commitments to Taiwan and help Taiwan maintain a sufficient self-defense capability commensurate with the threat that Taiwan faces. Doing so increases stability both across the Taiwan Strait and within the region. For over 40 years, every U.S. administration has noted that U.S. policy toward Taiwan is grounded in the Taiwan Relations Act and the 3 joint communiques. I have a particular affection for the Taiwan Relations Act because it gives me this job. Beginning in 2020, the United States has also publicly stressed the importance of the 6 assurances provided to Taiwan at the time of the 3rd communique between the U.S. and the PRC. The recent declassification of 2 documents from that time made clear for all the U.S. understanding of our commitment to Taiwan's security. As President Reagan put it, and I quote here, "It is essential that the quality and quantity of the arms provided Taiwan be conditioned entirely on the threat posed by the PRC, both in quantitative and qualitative terms. Taiwan's defense capability relative to that of the PRC will be maintained." Thus, the foundations of our relationship with Taiwan remain the same. What has changed in recent years, however, is the increasing belligerence toward Taiwan coming from Beijing. The current leadership in Beijing insists that Taiwan move toward unification with the People's Republic of China under a 一国两制, 1 country, 2 systems formula. A formula rejected by almost all of the people on Taiwan. The reason for that rejection? Hong Kong. The actions that the PRC has taken in implementing that formula in Hong Kong have made it abundantly clear that unification on those terms would mean the end of Taiwan's democracy. Accordingly, Beijing has come to rely almost solely on coercive tactics, such as disinformation, malicious cyber actions, squeezing Taiwan's international space, and outright military intimidation to try to push a reluctant Taiwan toward unification. As the Taiwan Relations Act noted some 40 years ago, any effort to determine the future of Taiwan by other than peaceful means, including by boycotts or embargoes, would be a threat to the peace and security of the Western Pacific and a grave concern to the United States. Kurt Campbell, the White House coordinator for the Indo-Pacific, noted in July, unilateral change of Taiwan's status by Beijing would be catastrophic. The U.S. firmly believes that peace in the Indo-Pacific region is in everyone's interest. But in order to protect that peace, we are willing to call out bad behavior and stand with the people on Taiwan, recognizing Taiwan's role in our shared prosperity. Let's speak a little bit about the present and the future. During these tense and complicated times, the relationship between the U.S. and Taiwan grows stronger and stronger. If you had asked me 5 years ago what I thought U.S. ties with Taiwan would look like now, I doubt that I would have anticipated the strength and depth of our cooperation in a host of areas. In 5 more years, our solid partnership will continue to build on our shared values and interests, including in the areas of economic and trade ties, promotion of Taiwan's international space, bolstering Taiwan's self-defense, and people-to-people ties. Let's look briefly at the economy and trade. Despite having a population of only 23 million, Taiwan is the 9th largest trading partner of the United States. That said, there is room for even more growth. The American Institute in Taiwan and its counterpart, the Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office in the United States, and I'll call out the TICO office here in San Francisco, we all work together to address trade issues through the Trade and Investment Framework Agreement, or TIFA. If we can successfully use mechanisms like TIFA to resolve trade irritants between our 2 economies, we will foster an even stronger and closer trading relationship. Last month, as you have heard, AIT and TECRO held their first TIFA Joint Council meeting in 5 years. At that meeting, U.S. officials emphasized the importance of the U.S.-Taiwan trade and investment relationship and expressed their desire for stronger and more consistent engagement going forward. We discussed agriculture, made progress on long-standing U.S. concerns regarding medical devices, and agreed to new areas for cooperation, including the formation of a labor working group that will support President Biden's priority of a worker-centered trade policy. We look forward to launching this working group and reinvigorating the other existing working groups under the TIFA in the coming months. Late last year, AIT and TECRO launched an economic prosperity partnership dialogue, led on the U.S. side by then Undersecretary for Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment, Keith Krach. Undersecretary Krach had, in fact, just returned from Taiwan, where he represented the people of the United States at the funeral of Taiwan's first democratically elected president, Lee Teng-hui. That was, I should add, the highest level visit by a State Department official to Taiwan since 1979. Under the Economic Prosperity Partnership Dialogue, the United States and Taiwan discussed such areas of cooperation as global health security, science and technology, 5G and telecommunications security, supply chains, women's economic empowerment, infrastructure cooperation, and investment screening. And those conversations will be continuing. Taiwan plays a critical role in some of the most sophisticated global supply chains, and as we all know, as a designer and manufacturer of the most advanced semiconductors. As we enter into the era of the Internet of Things, Taiwan's prominence in supply chains will only grow, spanning multiple industries such as the automotive industry, telecommunications, and even household appliances. Undersecretary Krach's visit to Taiwan followed an August 2020 visit by then Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar. Secretary Azar, the first U.S. cabinet member to visit Taiwan since EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy in 2014, witnessed the signing of a new AIT-TECRO Memorandum of Understanding on Health Cooperation. This Memorandum of Understanding builds on decades of close cooperation between the United States and Taiwan in the field of public health. I've seen this on many visits here to the States, whether it's in Texas working on cancer, or up in Colorado, every place I go, you see dramatic cooperation in scientific fields and health fields between the U.S. and Taiwan, much of which people remain unaware of until you go and visit. The MOU will help strengthen cooperation in global health security, investigation and control of infectious disease, research, prevention, and treatment of chronic disease, and the development of drugs and vaccines. Also, late last year, AIT and TECRO signed an agreement on scientific and technological cooperation that will promote collaborative research and advance joint understanding on a broad range of science and technology topics. This agreement reaffirms the close partnership between the United States and Taiwan and elevates the science and technology cooperation between our societies. Let's turn quickly to international space and health cooperation. The U.S. mantra for Taiwan used to be, with respect to international space, let's help Taiwan. It has shifted to Taiwan can help. Finding venues and platforms to highlight and amplify Taiwan's contributions to the international community, and world health in particular, is a key priority. We were thrilled to launch earlier this year a significant expansion of the Global Cooperation and Training Framework, or GCTF. The GCTF is a platform that brings Taiwanese expertise to the world through workshops focused on topics of contemporary concern, such as combating COVID-19, or building media literacy to counter disinformation, a problem for many societies. We have implemented a decentralized structure for planning and implementing GCTF events that not only allows us to increase the number of workshops we conduct, but also to expand the program's geographical reach. The new model allows us to tailor GCTF events to resonate with specific regional audiences. We have also formalized what we call the Pacific Island Dialogue into an annual discussion hosted by AIT and TechRo to improve coordination of joint efforts in support of Taiwan's diplomatic partners in the Western Pacific. I wish not too many people here were focused on the fact that we openly collaborate with Taiwan as we look at the challenges from Beijing in the Pacific, and as we make sure, do everything we can at least to make sure that diplomatic partners are frankly not bought off by mainland China. And that, of course, means let's touch now on the PRC's increasingly provocative attempts to isolate Taiwan. The PRC continues to block Taiwan's participation, as you all know, in international organizations such as the World Health Organization. This at a time when Taiwan's initial success in containing the pandemic and its eagerness to share its knowledge and utilize its capacities for the good of humankind underscored how much Taiwan has to offer the global community. I brought this mask today not because I wanted to pretend that I was a commando or anything like that, but because it's one of the ones that says made in Taiwan. And when Taiwan experienced its own COVID-19 outbreak, the PRC used that opportunity to squeeze Taiwan's diplomatic partners while interfering with an effective response on island. I am very proud that the U.S. was able to contribute 2.5 million vaccines to help Taiwan combat the We are seeing a groundswell of support for Taiwan among a growing and increasingly diverse group of countries. Parliaments across Europe are passing resolutions in support of Taiwan, reflecting growing public sentiment in favor of Taiwan's participation on the global stage. Lithuania has just announced plans to open a representative office in Taipei, and Taiwan's diplomatic partners have stuck by Taiwan, even in the face of PRC attempts to use vaccines to bribe them into changing recognition. That's where I have to talk a little bit about self-defense and security. The momentum generated by these increasing calls for Taiwan's inclusion are likewise apparent in the security environment. Several recent firsts have followed the new administration's outreach to allies in the region and more broadly. Joint statements with close U.S. allies like South Korea include explicit mentions of cross-strait security for the first time, as did the most recent G7 and NATO communiques. And I will tell you, these statements, sounds like diplomacy, it's a big deal. You know, it tells the Chinese that it's not just the U.S. that's watching what's happening in the Taiwan Strait. Also this year, a Japan-U.S. leader's statement reinforced the importance of peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. Japan's annual defense white paper also explicitly echoed that sentiment this summer, stressing, and I quote, "The stability of the situation around Taiwan is important, not only for the security of our country, Japan, but for the stability of the international community." As allies and partners in the region and around the globe increasingly push back on China's aggressive action, it is important that Taiwan remain committed to the changes that only it can make for itself. Taiwan must build as strong a deterrent as possible, as quickly as possible. In that, U.S. security relations with Taiwan are about much more than arms sales. Taiwan's key defensive military leaders need to overhaul Taiwan's security concept by embracing modern, resilient, and cost-effective approaches, as well as innovative ways to employ existing capabilities. We are concerned that that is not happening quickly enough. Taiwan needs defense in depth. Taiwan needs truly asymmetric capabilities and strong reserve forces. But as arms sales have become regularized and increasing in scope and dollar amounts as the threat from China increases, Taiwan's focus and direction seem to be shifting back to conventional large-scale platforms. Truth be told, Taiwan's 2021 quadrennial defense review seemingly abandoned the previous well-received overall defense concept. The QDR instead championed long-range strike, local air superiority, and controlling the sea lines of communication. All concepts seemingly focused on a traditional, conventional battle rather than an asymmetric defense for a struggle that we all hope will never occur, and we all know that Taiwan cannot afford to lose. Returning to those systems which are mobile, survivable, and lethal, or as former Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense David Hulvey put it, large numbers of small things is a real and urgent course correction. And let's talk about building our shared values and people-to-people ties. Security has been a key part of our relationship since the TRA, and so has people-to-people engagement based on our shared interests and values. Here, too, there has been notable progress. This year, the administration put out new contact guidance to encourage engagement with representatives from Taiwan. The State Department regularly holds meetings with Taiwan representatives at all levels, as do other agencies of the executive branch. In addition, U.S. embassies overseas are urged to engage with Taiwan representatives in those countries. We have a robust agenda to discuss, and now many ways to do so. In December of 2020, AIT and TECRO signed an agreement to foster international education cooperation. We have always had large exchange programs, and both sides agreed to extend State Department exchange programs, support Taiwan's 2030 bilingual education initiative, and facilitate Chinese language programs with funding support from Taiwan. This past year has been tough for students to travel back and forth, but when travel is again allowed, the programs will be larger than ever. The U.S.-Taiwan consultations on democratic governance in the Indo-Pacific region, convened under the auspices of AIT and TECRO, continue to be an important venue for U.S.-Taiwan collaboration on issues of human rights, anti-corruption, and democratic governance. Then Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, Robert Destro, hosted the most recent round of talks last September while in Taiwan to attend the memorial ceremony for former President Lee Teng-hui. Among the important outcomes of this discussion was the opening of the regional offices of the National Democratic Institute and the International Republican Institute in Taipei. As the NDI's Manpreet Singh Anand put it, Taiwan's democracy is a model for the Asia-Pacific region and the world. I can think of no more fitting tribute to President Lee than to continue to build on this important collaboration in the years to come. I'm going to wrap up because I think everybody's getting tired, but in any event, you can see that from the last time I was here, there's been a tremendous amount of activity between people in the United States and Taiwan, and we have momentum that will carry us forward. As State Department Deputy Secretary Wendy Sherman has noted, Now is an important time to reaffirm the U.S. commitment to working with allies and partners to promote peace, security, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and to uphold the international rules-based order. That energy will give our new AIT director in Taiwan, Sandra Oker, a great platform to keep building on. Sandra's an extremely impressive diplomat, and I look forward to her stewardship of our bilateral relations in the coming years. This past year has been difficult for both the United States and Taiwan. A global pandemic, increasing belligerence from the PRC, economic challenges. But that said, I'm confident that our shared democratic values and commitment to a rules-based international order will continue to carry the United States-Taiwan relationship to ever greater heights. Taiwan 没过有意万岁啊！